The T-Town site has attracted worldwide attention since its accidental discovery last year. Recently, with the excavation of a large number of exquisite stone and pottery, it has once again sparked heated discussions among netizens worldwide. Among them, the most noteworthy is undoubtedly this metal file that transcends the times as if crossing back from modern times. The material, craftsmanship, and style of this file are almost the same as modern files, but after expert appraisal, it does indeed belong to an ancient artifact over 10,000 years ago. Zhang Tian stared at the file in the picture, his pupils earthquake. Damn it! Isn't this the file from my house? Keywords of the novel. Back to prehistoric being a wild man without a pop-up window, back to prehistoric being a wild man. Download the complete set of TXT, back to prehistoric being a wild man. Read the latest chapter of Prehistoric Being a Wild Man. Chapter 1. People Looking Up at the Sky. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. People Looking Up at the Sky. Zhang Tian sat in the empty carriage of the last subway, legs crossed, his head tilted on the armrest billboard, and his gaze fell on the opposite display screen. The screen looped through reports of the mysterious disappearance of archaeologists at the T-Town site, as well as the progress of the police search. This is the recent front page headline, with related information dominating the hot search lists of almost all platforms. Even the media channels of the subway are hard to avoid. Lin Yu, the name of the missing person, is currently pursuing a PhD at Peking University. In his 20s, he discovered the Chazhen site, a once-in-a-century archaeological discovery, which is a rare opportunity for many archaeologists. She should have a bright future ahead of her. Unfortunately. Zhang Tian let out a sigh, closed his eyes and regained his composure. Despite 2 weeks of high-intensity work, he couldn't bear it even though he was beaten up. But he has no complaints. Because he is the boss. I am in charge of a game studio with 5 children under my command. Currently, I am developing a mobile game called Wilderness that simulates the progress of civilization. Players can guide the development of primitive tribes from the perspective of gods. Coincidentally, the discovery of the T-Town site has aroused the public's attention and curiosity towards archaeology and primitive society. In the spirit of being enthusiastic and not taking risks, as the owner, chief planner, and chief designer, it is natural to take the lead, work overtime, and release the game as soon as possible. After 2 weeks of non-stop day and night, the development of the game has finally entered the final stage. You can have a good night's sleep tonight. After arriving home, Zhang Tian fell asleep as soon as he touched the pillow. The night falls low, the stars and moon are shining brightly, and the damp and cold night wind seeps into the animal skin dress, blowing cold eggs. Zhang Tian stared at the sky for a long time. He clearly remembered the last scene before closing his eyes, which was a false crystal lamp on the ceiling and a warm blanket. How could he be in the mountains and wilderness as soon as he opened his eyes, and not be covered in clothes? Belief value. 1. He didn't come to his senses until this line of small characters appeared in front of him. Belief value. Isn't this the setting in my game? The most basic gameplay of this game is to build a tribe, increase population, enhance faith value, consume faith value in exchange for resources or cast divine spells. In theory, there should be a resource column and a magic column. There really are. So I traveled into my own game. Although he does plan to conduct the test the next day, is on-site testing a bit outrageous. Zhang Tian lowered his head to look at the deerskin short skirt wrapped around his waist, blocking his private area. He then turned back to look at the natural cave where the flames flickered and figures flickered, with a bitter color on his face. Fortunately, he is the chief planner of the game and knows the story background and all the settings very well. As long as he does not act recklessly or provoke large carnivorous animals such as tigers and bears, there is no problem for him to survive. The belief value is 1, and the only point of belief comes from himself. Oh my God, this is his name in the tribe. Originally a rare wild man in this era who longed for the sky, he would always sit alone outside the cave at night, gazing up at the sky. It was his piety that allowed the power of the sky god to awaken in the wilderness. 1 point of faith value cannot use any divine spells, even the lowest level divine spells require 10 points of faith value to be consumed. The exchangeable resources are also very limited, including an egg, a spoonful of rice, a bowl of flour, a rock sugar, a bag of instant coffee, a file. What are they all? Shouldn't it be a bundle of firewood, a corpse of birds and animals, and a stone tool? Which turtle grandson secretly changed my settings? Zhang Tian read through the exchangeable resources and suddenly realized that they seemed to be all things he had in his family. I dare say that I didn't have enough people here, and I had to pay for the resources myself. Oh my God, you're watching the sky again. Aren't you cold? Dressed in a deerskin dress and of similar age, the wild man owl walked up to Zhang Tian and uttered a few short and incoherent syllables. The language of this era was very poor, usually consisting of simple vocabulary, with limited meaning that could be expressed. Instead of words, they placed more emphasis on understanding. Zhang Tian shook his head, wagged his tongue, and replied in the same brief words, "It's not cold." Recalling the past, Xiao and he were born on the same day, and by blood relationship, they were cousins. However, in primitive society, there was no distinction between kinship and kinship. As long as they belonged to the same tribe, they were siblings, and people from different tribes were strangers. Due to being born on the same day, their relationship is closer than others, such as the difference between twin brothers and ordinary brothers. There are a total of 60 or 70 people in the tribe, which may be 70 or 80, according to Zhang Tian's estimation based on memory. Nowadays, people are still counting with their fingers. If they exceed 10, they need to count with knots or marks on the cave wall. To know the exact number of people, they need to enter the cave and nod their heads one by one. In my memory, the male-to-female ratio in the tribe is relatively coordinated, with males responsible for hunting and females engaged in gathering. Zhang Tian's mother died after giving birth to him. As for his biological father, because the tribe prohibits mating with the same tribe, ghosts know which tribe's wild man his biological father is. Zhang Tian only considered him dead. He has a group of uncles and aunts who regard him as their own. Tribes place a greater emphasis on their own survival than others, with each newborn being the common child of everyone. Even in modern society, many families still prioritize the reproduction of offspring, let alone in primitive societies. From this perspective, although both of his parents died, he was not an orphan. Let's go in, Auntie is going to tell a story. Xiao stood outside for a while, feeling a bit cold. Zhang Tian's hands and feet were also cold, so he followed him back to the cave to warm up by the fire. All people in the tribe are equal, and there is no superiority or inferiority. But there is a big parent who is the oldest person in the tribe. In terms of seniority, she is the grandmother of Zhang Tian and Xiao. However, there is no grandmother in the tribe because the average life expectancy of primitive people is only around 30 years old, and the vast majority of people cannot live up to this generation. The old man is the only grandmother in the tribe, and everyone calls her Auntie. Auntie is the spiritual leader of the tribe. She has a wide range of knowledge and rich wilderness survival experiences. Every night, she tells her own experiences as stories to the children, which is one of the few entertainment activities in the tribe. Due to her frequent storytelling, Auntie has the best expression and understanding abilities in the tribe. Auntie and a group of aunts sat around the campfire, weaving bamboo baskets with bamboo strips. The men sat around on the other side, happily polishing their weapons and tools. The tribe has mastered basic weaving techniques and the polishing methods of simple stone tools. After observation, Zhang Tian came to the above conclusion. He and Xiao were still young, so they did not join the men's team, but instead infiltrated the women's camp. Silently, he had already finished nodding the heads of a total of 67 people, with the majority being young and middle-aged, followed by children, and the least being elderly, as most people did not live until old age and were eliminated by natural factors such as beasts, natural disasters, pathogenic bacteria, and wound infections. Caves, bonfires, men polishing stone tools, women weaving bamboo baskets. Everything seemed reasonable, but Zhang Tian always felt that something was missing. Gollum, the owl's stomach suddenly screamed. The sound of this bowel ringing was a bit loud, and it sounded even louder on a quiet night. Everyone was taken aback. Zhang Tian finally understood what was missing. Lack of food. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Winter approaches. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Winter approaches. Today's harvest should leave a portion to meet the needs of tomorrow morning, at least to meet the needs of men, so as to have the strength to go hunting. Zhang Tian has looked at every corner of the cave and found no food except for a pile of bone fragments. Not only did there be no food left for tomorrow morning, but even for tonight's meal, only a few bamboo rats, birds, winter bamboo shoots, and plant roots and stems were eaten. The men were half full, and children like Zhang Tian and Xiao were almost all hungry. Looking back, the food shortage has been going on for several days. Auntie said, "Xiao, if you're hungry, go to bed." Xiao shook his head and said, "I'm not hungry. Everyone is working hard, how can he feel embarrassed to sleep alone?" Auntie looked up and saw that the children were all tired and lethargic, so she put down the bamboo stick in her hand and said, "All right, everyone sit over." Everyone stopped their movements, the men leaned over, and everyone sat around the campfire, quietly waiting for the routine storytelling session every night. Auntie said, "I know everyone hasn't had enough to eat, because the cold weather has come and the beasts have hidden away. I have experienced many cold days where they couldn't eat enough, which is normal. I remember the coldest and most hungry times, when there was no grass growing on the ground and the river was frozen with thick ice. Without any food, we could only peel the bark of trees to eat. Auntie doesn't have the concept of seasons, so she uses cold weather to refer to winter." Everyone listened attentively and was surprised and pitiful when they heard that they could only peel the bark and eat it in the end. "Can you survive by eating tree bark?" asked Xiao curiously. Auntie shook her head and said, "Eating tree bark can satisfy hunger, but it's difficult to survive. Many people have died, and almost all the elderly have died." Everyone exclaimed in surprise. "We finally survived that cold day, with tender grass growing again on the ground and herds of wild animals coming out to forage. There was food everywhere, and we survived and lived very well. The same goes for now. As long as we survived this cold day, we would wait for food everywhere to fill us every day." Auntie showed a kind, determined, and hopeful smile. Encouraged by the crowd, the tiger waved its thick arms and said with excitement, "Auntie is right. We still have bamboo rats and birds to eat now, much better than Auntie did back then. Auntie can survive, so can we. That's right. We can do it too." Once high emotions occupy the high ground of thinking, hunger in the stomach also has to temporarily retreat. The crowd was excited, only Zhang Tian had a solemn expression and didn't say a word. Only he knew that according to the background setting of the game, the current cold was caused by the impact of an asteroid, which caused a sudden drop in global temperature. The real winter has not yet arrived. This winter will be colder and longer than previous winters. Even worse, due to the sudden cooling of the weather, the tribe has no reserves of even the most basic winter food, and will face the crisis of food shortage and enduring cold and hunger every day in the future. Bad luck. Surprisingly, it's the beginning of the northern region. Staying in the north, let alone developing, is even a problem for survival. To survive, one must migrate to the relatively warm south. Zhang Tian did not pour cold water on them. The tribe has lived in this cave for generations, living within a radius of no more than 100 miles. No matter how far away, no one has been to it. It is impossible for a mother to gamble on the fate of the entire tribe just because of a child's words, leading everyone on a completely unknown journey. I can only plan slowly. The risk of traveling alone is too high. It is best to persuade everyone to go with him. If it is really impossible, even if he is alone, he will have to leave this place. Oh my God, why is your complexion so bad? At this moment, Xiao asked Zhang Tian about his lack of vocabulary and inability to express his melancholy. He then pinched his eyebrows with his hand and learned Zhang Tian's melancholic expression. Everyone also noticed Zhang Tian's low mood, and when everyone was drunk, the person who woke up alone appeared particularly eye-catching. Is there something uncomfortable? Zhao's mother also asked Zhang Tian's Aunt Lan Hua, who was raised from a young age. Zhang Tian shook his head and said, I just feel like there's a lack of food right now, and I should go hunting with Tiger Head and the others. Yes. I think so too. Xiao stood up, picked up his stone axe and swung it several times in a dignified manner, demonstrating his strength to prove that he was capable of hunting tasks. Tiger Head laughed heartily and said, Okay. If you're willing, come out hunting with us tomorrow. The owl cheered and leaped with joy. Zhang Tian also smiled and walked behind the women. There lay a bundle of fine bamboo that had been chopped back during the day, which was not as thick as his wrist. It was slender and straight, and he tried it on. The hardness and elasticity were both very good. After selecting, he took out a bamboo nearly 4 meters long and set it aside, saying to Aunt Orchid, Leave this bamboo for me. Bamboo is not suitable for making weapons. You can ask Tiger Head to cut a piece of wood for you. I don't use it as a weapon. Zhang Tian left this sentence and walked towards the pile of bones and debris in the corner. Lan Hua gave him a strange look without asking much. The least scarce thing in the mountain was bamboo, leaving one for him was nothing. Zhang Tian rummaged through the bone debris, and the women picked out the better bones. The larger ones were ground into bone knives, the smaller ones into bone needles or various decorations, and the rest were all crooked melons and cracked dates. In the end, the general picked out 5 pieces of broken bones, whether it was the skull of a bamboo rat or a bird or beast. In short, they were flat and narrow, only 2 fingers wide. Nevertheless, it took a lot of effort to grind these broken bones into hooked shapes. He plans to make a fishing rod. The cave is located on the mountainside, and the forest in the mountain is mainly a broad-leaved forest with dense green leaves and thick branches. Fortunately, there is also a small bamboo forest growing in it. There is a river below the mountain. He remembered going to the river with Xiao yesterday to fetch water, and the river had already shown signs of slowing down in flow and decreasing in water level. However, some deciduous trees in the mountains were only slightly yellowing, which should still be autumn. However, it was already almost cold compared to previous winters. If it really arrived in December, it would still be fine. Over the long years, humans have evolved wisdom, learned to observe and summarize the laws of development, and learned to transform past experiences into life experiences. But wisdom also brings inertia thinking, and people start to be limited by experience, stick to conventions, and ignore animal instincts, losing their keen sense of potential crises. This is a place where beasts are stronger than humans. The consecutive hunting failures were not due to the wild animals hiding, but because most of them noticed a sudden drop in temperature and a sudden decrease in food, especially large herbivores such as deer and sheep, which began to migrate in groups towards warm and well-fed areas. For a considerable period of time in the future, they will not come back, and hunting will be difficult to have a bountiful harvest, which is not related to the number of people or the advanced level of tools. Zhang Tian plans to go to the river to try his luck. Fish don't like to move even in cold weather. It's not easy to have a good harvest, but hunting may come empty-handed, while fishing has never been empty-handed. This confidence is still present. The people of the tribe fell asleep one after another. Zhang Tian voluntarily expressed his responsibility for tonight's vigil. After the silence of the night, someone should watch the bonfire to prevent venomous snakes and beasts from sneaking in at night. Of course, given the current situation, his uncles may be eager to be attacked by venomous snakes and beasts. Once a person is hungry, even if it is a tiger, they will slide and show it to you. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Incorrect Art Style. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 Incorrect Art Style, Belief Value. 0. Consuming only 1 point of faith, a file appeared out of nowhere and landed in Zhang Tian's palm. Rubber grip, flat blade, regardless of material, size, style, or even wear, it is no different from the one at home. Looking at the resource bar again, the number of files in the redeemable resources has increased from 3 to 2, and the resources have become limited. Did you indeed teleport the file from home? What does wool come out of sheep? Zhang Tian regretted it too late. If he had known this, he should have bought more sets of wilderness survival tools and kept them at home. He asked why he didn't exchange them directly for fishing rods. He did want to, but for the 3 fishing rods at home, each one requires a belief value of over 100, which means he is willing but unable to do so. It's not difficult to make a simple fishing rod by doing it yourself. Polishing the hook requires some effort, but with a file in hand, this process can be greatly shortened, and one night is enough. Zhang Tian crossed his legs and placed the bone on the stone, patiently grinding it. The tiger's head, who was guarding the night with him, showed a strange expression. He didn't know what the thin, short, and black thing Zhang Tian was holding in his hand was, let alone why he had to do that to bone debris. Afraid of disturbing the rest of the tribe, he didn't ask much and only added some firewood to the campfire. He said to Zhang Tian, "I'll go to bed first. When the firewood is almost burned, you can call me up." Zhang Tianxia made an okay gesture and immediately nodded again. Hu Tu was stunned for a moment, but also bent his knuckles and circled his thumb and index finger into a circle. "It's a bit strange. It's really strange." He shook his head and lay down on all fours by the campfire, quickly snoring. As long as the deep iron pestle is ground into a needle, the bone-made fish hook cannot be compared to the iron-made fish hook. The hook body is about 2 centimeters wide, and the hook tip is slightly thinner than the bone needle. If you often do handicrafts, you can also polish a barb on the inside of the hook tip like Zhang Tian. Don't underestimate the primitive people's grinding technology, and don't overestimate the IQ of fish. Some archaeologists once carved the exact same fish hook according to the unearthed bone hook, took it to try fishing, and caught dozens of tilapia in the morning. The fish hook gradually polished into shape, and Zhang Tian blew away the powder. He touched the tip and felt quite prickly, piercing the fish's mouth without any problem. He walked lightly behind the women and dragged the bamboo pole that was left alone outside the cave. I went into the hole again and found a bone knife. With the back of the knife, I gently knocked off the excess branches on the bamboo pole. When I reached the tip, my hand movements became even gentler, afraid that I might accidentally break the bamboo pole, which would ruin all my previous efforts. It's really cold. He stomped his feet in place, breathed a sigh into his hand, and then smoothed out the scar. I tried waving the rod, but the elasticity was still acceptable. If I want to use it for a long time, I need to smoke, straighten, and paint it. Fortunately, this bamboo is straight enough, so there is no need to be so particular. It can last for 10.5 days even if I use it for a while. Bamboo is a good thing. Bamboo poles can be used to make bows, arrows, and fishing rods. After being cut small, the bamboo meat can be removed to weave bamboo baskets and cages. Bamboo fibers can be collected and twisted into ropes. The ropes that women had needed during the day were neatly arranged and placed in a dry place to dry. Zhang Tian selected several relatively long and sturdy ropes, tied them together to form a long rope, and then wrapped them tightly around a bamboo pole. The other end was wrapped with his self-made bone fishing hook, and a simple fishing rod was formed. Put away the fishing rod in a precious and important place, take bamboo strips and slices, and sit by the campfire to weave a bamboo cage. What about fishing in a cage without fish? Starting from the bottom, using the simplest zigzag weaving method, the side length is about the same as his shoulder width, half a person high, and it doesn't matter if the gap is larger. If the fish caught is smaller than the gap between the bamboo pieces, there is no need to keep it. Then, according to the size of the opening part of the bamboo cage, a funnel-shaped cover with a wide top and a narrow bottom was woven. It was upside down and fastened into the cage, preventing the fish from jumping out and sinking into the river bottom at night. It can also be used as a fishing cage. It was already late at night, and everything was quiet. Only the crackling sound of the firewood burning was indescribable, and later even the sound of burning gradually faded away. Zhang Tian added some new firewood to the fire and saw that his hands were covered in bamboo, wood shavings, and soil. He got up and wiped the dry and smooth rock wall, then walked over and shook the tiger's head to wake it up. It's time to go to bed. I have to wake up early tomorrow and become a fisherman. Oh my God. Wake up. Wake up. Zhang Tian opened his eyes in a daze and saw a dirty face and messy hair. Xiao grinned and said, "Tiger Head and the others are going hunting." At dawn, the people of the tribe were all active, and the young men and women were all dressed up and ready to go out hunting and gathering. The dancing flames dispelled the cold morning, and the cave was quite warm. It's not easy to start a fire, even during the day it won't extinguish the spark. Compared to the vast mountains and trees, the burnt wood is not even a drop in the bucket, let alone in the cold weather. It's impossible to start a fire for a moment. Zhang Tian got up and did stretching exercises outside the cave. Last night I slept pretty well. After all, it was a primitive body that had already adapted to sleeping on the ground. However, my mind was a bit tired and I still couldn't accept the fact of time travel. I had a beautiful dream of cheering and winning after the game was released at night, and my saliva was still flowing. When I woke up, I had to face the reality of not being able to eat enough, which was really cruel. The weather is cold and dry, there is no fog in the mountains, and the view is very good. Looking around, the green mountains on both sides face each other, and a large river in the canyon has wide waves. The cave is located on the mountainside, not far from the river, but the tribe rarely goes down the mountain to fish. This is mainly because the river is deep and fast, and it is difficult to harvest anything with spears. In addition, the hunting income is already enough to survive, so there is no need to sacrifice proximity for distance, and fishing and hunting have developed. The owl's stomach began to growl again. Zhang Tian is also hungry, everyone is hungry, and a few sisters who are in their 60s have stars in their eyes and white lips. If they don't eat enough today, they may be squeezed dry by the children in their stomachs. The young men are ready to go out to search for food. Before leaving, Auntie encouraged and mobilized everyone, instructing them to come back before dark. The so-called spiritual leader only becomes more effective when the will of the tribe is depressed. Encouraged by the crowd, the men lifted their bone knives and stone spears, the women picked up their bamboo baskets and pointed digging rods. Zhang Tian raised a nearly 4-meter-long bamboo pole with one hand and a half-person-high bamboo cage with the other. A guy with a bad art style emerged from the crowd. "What are you doing?" Everyone looked at Zhang Tian strangely. "I'll go fishing by the river, you guys go hunting, don't worry about me. When the sun sets on that mountain, I'll come back." Zhang Tian pointed to the sharp mountain peak in the distance and strode down the mountain. "I'll go too." Xiao caught up with Zhang Tian's footsteps, carrying a wooden stick with a bowl-wide mouth. Hu too felt something was wrong with Zhang Tian last night and didn't know what he was secretly stirring up. Looking at their distant figures, he didn't stop them and greeted the men, saying, "Let them go. It's just children, we didn't expect them to help. Let's go hunting." The men pounded their chests, snored and shouted, and their morale surged as they entered the mountain to hunt. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Fishing Man's Wealth. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Fishing Man's Wealth. What does fishing mean? Fishing is throwing this hook into the water and waiting for the fish to bite it. You'll understand in a while. The two of them swam up the riverbank, passing through round hills covered in green grass. The hills on both sides of the canyon were undulating, with gentle slopes and dense vegetation on the slopes. There were oak trees with dark brown bark, beech trees, and slightly reddish maple trees, while willows, birch trees, and poplar trees with thin bark and soft branches and leaves grew intermittently. There are more tree species that Zhang Tian cannot recognize, as well as many unnamed flowers and plants. Pink and snow-white delicate petals fall into the mountains, some have withered and decayed, while others stubbornly bloom. Looking into the distance, towering mountains block the view, and the towering mountains are covered in pure ice and snow. Under the soft light of the rising sun, the icy mountain top reflects a magnificent color of peach red and light purple, as if wearing a huge crown adorned with jewelry. Such a magnificent scene shook Zhang Tian's heart, slightly reducing the bitterness in his heart. Unfortunately, he eventually found a backwater with a slower water flow and more aquatic plants, and dug out many earthworms and unnamed small carnivorous insects on the spot. Zhang Tian squatted by the river, brushed aside a layer of plankton on the surface, picked up the river water, and washed his face. A rough face was reflected in the water, with a protruding forehead and flat cheeks. In terms of head-to-body ratio, it was not much different from modern people, with much more developed limbs. In short, according to Zhang Tian's aesthetics, he could not be considered a handsome man. As for what he looked like in the eyes of primitive people, he had no choice but to know. Perhaps primitive people didn't care about beauty or ugliness at all. He thought to himself, patting his leather skirt and standing up, waving his fishing rod to pat the water surface. After the weather turns cold, fish become lazy like humans. They are not as active in foraging as in hot weather, so they need to make some noise to attract their attention. Hang the bait, pick up a piece of withered yellow broadleaf and thread it into the fishing line as a buoy, then swing the arm and the rod, and the fishing hook falls into the river. The withered yellow broadleaf floats on the river surface, surrounded by green aquatic plants, with only a touch of yellow that is very easy to recognize. Here, hold it, don't move. Xiao took the fishing rod and heard that he couldn't move. His body immediately stiffened and he nervously asked, and then what? Wait. If a fish bites the hook, the yellow leaf will move, call me then. Zhang Tian turned his head and walked towards the forest. Why are you going? I'll go pick up some wood and come back to make a fire, it's too cold. Fishing is not like hunting, the latter is a mobile battle, and the former may be a penalty station. In this cold weather, if you don't catch a few fish, your body will freeze and get sick first. Drilling wood to start a fire and striking stones to start a fire are compulsory courses for every primitive person. Zhang Tian quickly built a bonfire on the shore, and the heat from the burning was transferred through convection. The surrounding air gradually became warm, and the water temperature also rose. Fish have a tendency to warm up and prefer to drill in areas with higher water temperatures, so fishing is usually done in areas with sufficient sunlight exposure. At this moment, the water temperature near the riverbank gradually rose, and the lazy fish in the river finally wanted to move their nest. They swam over slowly and looked at it, scared. Isn't this big earthworm not paying attention to me, the carp king? So he opened his mouth and bit. The withered leaf buoy suddenly shook violently, and the struggling force of the fish was transmitted through the fishing line to the fishing rod, and then from the fishing rod to the owl's fingertips. He felt his fingers tingle, and the goosebumps from head to toe stood up. In this moment, he finally felt the joy of fishing. It's moving. It's moving. Give it to me. Zhang Tian took control of the fishing rod and did not rush to lift it. Instead, he shook the rod, which was equivalent to punching his opponent before the ring. He realized that the opponent was a heavyweight, lifted the fishing rod up and forward, released the line to walk it, and then slowly lifted the rod to exert force. Wow! The river splashed with water, and a carp about half a meter long broke through the water and ran aground on the shore. Its mouth opened and closed, and it occasionally made a splash. It was evident that it had been walked to exhaustion. Without saying a word, Xiao picked up a wooden stick and hit the carp's head with a hard blow. Don't! It was already late, and the carp passed away on the spot, splattering blood all over the ground. Zhang Tian looked at the mess on the ground and was stunned. Xiao looked puzzled and said, "What's wrong?" He has never hunted, let alone caught fish. He just heard from his uncles since childhood that only dead beasts are good beasts, so he didn't hesitate to take action. It's okay, there's no need to kill it. We can bring it back alive, fresh and delicious. How can we bring it back alive? Auntie once said that fish will die if they leave the water. Use this. Zhang Tian kicked the bamboo cage at his feet. It doesn't matter if you beat it to death, except for Zhang Tian, no one else will care about whether it's new or not. He was just worried that the blow from the owl would damage his fishing hook, which would not be worth the loss. Pulling out the fish hook from the flesh and blood-blurred fish head, fortunately, the hook was intact and undamaged. He re-baited the fish, threw the hook into the river, and handed the fishing rod to the owl. Owl stood straight by the river, motionless like a statue, hoping to experience the trembling sensation again. The body of the carp was left untouched by Zhang Tian, and it's not good to soak the bleeding fish in a bamboo cage. He had the idea of grilling and eating it before. He and Xiao were both very hungry, and this carp weighed at least 6 or 7 pounds, enough for the two of them to eat. But soon the idea was dispelled, and the basis for the existence and mutual trust of the tribe was food sharing. It was best not to do such things that were not conducive to unity. Fortunately, the temperature is low now, and even exposing the corpse in the wilderness cannot damage it. Zhang Tian took out the broken bones he picked out last night, along with 4 pieces, and he wanted to make all of them into fish hooks. It's moving. Soon, another fish caught the bait, and the owl shouted excitedly. It was a small fish weighing 2 or 3 pounds. Zhang Tian easily lifted and pulled the rod, while another carp was suspended in mid-air, with its mouth open and a face full of lovelessness. Here, you grab it with your hands. Xiao Yiyan grabbed the slippery body of the carp, and the carp struggled symbolically. Xiao shouted, his heart pounding, inexplicably excited. Zhang Tian took out the hook from the fish's mouth and kicked the bamboo cage, saying, "Throw it in." The carp followed the funnel into the cage. The bamboo cage did not enter the shallow water, and the river water did not cover the fish's body. Xiao was very curious and squatted down to observe for a while, confirming that the fish in the cage could not come out, before finally letting go. Zhang Tianxia lifted the rod and once again entrusted the task of punishment to Xiao, sitting by the campfire to continue grinding the fishing hook. Xiao was also happy to stand still, and he even felt that this was the fun of fishing. The longer he waited, the more excited the moment the fishing rod shook. "Oh my God, next time I'll pull the fishing rod." Willing to try is a good thing, Zhang Tian readily agreed. The sun gradually rises above the head, and the temperature also rises slightly. The fish become more active and bite the hook more frequently. Xiao missed 2 times and ran away with 2 big fish, which made him very frustrated. However, he quickly learned his lesson, regained his strength, and the more he fished, the smoother it became. As long as he lifted the rod, there would always be a harvest. Zhang Tian couldn't help but glance at him, thinking to himself that this kid has a bit of potential as a fisherman. Owl is addicted to fishing, unable to extricate himself, and even forgets about hunger. Zhang Tian was not idle either, not only polishing out 4 fishing hooks, but also weaving 2 bamboo cages before sunset. As the sun sets in the western mountains, the faint cries of "oh, oh" can be heard in the mountains and fields. The elders in the tribe urged them. Xiao had no choice but to put away his fishing rod, take a deep breath, and shout in the direction of the cave. Zhang Tian could hear his excitement, but when his voice reached the mountain, most of the people in the cave couldn't hear him. The two of them struggled to drag the bamboo cage to the shore. Compared with the bleakness of the previous days, today is a daifengshu, salad of assorted fresh vegetables. A cage full of fish weighs at least 60 or 70 kilograms. In addition, the collected plant roots and stems are enough for everyone to have a full meal. Xiao now really wants to know what the hunting situation is like. He inexplicably has a little sense of victory or defeat and an urgent desire to show off to his tribe. This is an emotion he has never had before, and he himself cannot explain it clearly. Zhang Tian sank the two newly woven bamboo cages into the bottom of the river, tied some earthworms and insects with ropes, and the loophole-shaped cover was folded upside down inside the cage, with the opening facing the direction of the river flow. Xiao was puzzled and said, "What is this for?" "Take a chance, what if the fish will swim in on their own?" "Can fish swim into cages on their own?" "What about swimming in? Why don't we just swim out again?" Xiao cannot understand the meaning of this move. Zhang Tian didn't explain. The two of them picked up the bamboo cage and wrapped their hands around the bottom, afraid that it wouldn't be able to withstand the force and crack open from inside. The sunset dyed the mountains and rivers red, and the two of them returned to the mountains and forests in the afterglow of the sunset. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Returning with a full load. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Returning with a full load. When the sun set on the top of the highest mountain, the women who went out to gather returned in silence, with heavy footsteps and tired expressions. Auntie and the elderly and children left behind in the cave felt heavy when they saw the bamboo baskets in their hands, and their stomachs seemed even more hungry. The women's harvest is almost the same as a few days ago. After the cold weather, many food sources, including ferns and roses, almost stop growing. They can collect fewer fruits and rhizome blocks, but fortunately, many slightly pointed winter bamboo shoots have grown in the bamboo forest. What should we do after the winter bamboo shoots are dug up? Lan Hua poured out the winter bamboo shoots from the bamboo basket and asked, "Haven't they come back yet, Tiger Head?" "Not yet. They must have encountered a big guy." "I hope so." Auntie said this in her mouth, knowing better than anyone else that the most likely scenario is that men have not hunted enough wild animals, so they have to go further to search for food. Everyone stopped talking and started peeling the bamboo shoots. Lan Hua looked around and said strangely, "Where are Xiao and Tian? Haven't they come back yet?" "No. Didn't they go to the river? Can they go for so long?" Lan Hua was worried about her son, so she walked outside the cave, took a deep breath, and shouted loudly towards the foot of the mountain. After waiting for a while, she heard a scream coming from the foot of the mountain, and her heart fell back into her stomach. Returning to the campfire and sitting down, the winter bamboo shoots had already been peeled. She picked up an unfinished flint knife and continued to polish them, muttering, "These two children are really immature and not young. In this situation, it's okay not to help. I still have the mood and strength to go play by the river." The child said, "What did he go to the river for?" "Fishing, right." Honghua has always had a good memory. She actually remembered what Zhang Tian said about fishing, but she didn't understand what fishing was, so she thought it was Zhang Tian's slip of the tongue and corrected it to fishing without authorization. "Come on." Orchid sneered, "I don't understand them yet. They say they're fishing. Once they reach the river, they must only focus on playing in the water. White, fire, leaves, and trees, you must not learn from owl and heaven, do you hear me?" She took the opportunity to educate several younger children. Living in a cave, there are not many topics to talk about every day, and parenting is one of the most talked about topics. As soon as women talk about it, they get excited and start chatting and discussing. At this moment, the men return to the cave with even heavier legs and a more disheartened expression. Glancing at the man's face, his heart immediately plummeted to the bottom. Looking at their hands again, almost everyone returned empty-handed, except for the tiger head carrying 2 bamboo rats, 2 wild rabbits, and 5 palm-sized birds. A dozen or so men went out hunting for a day and only brought back so little, indicating that there were really no wild beasts left in this mountain. As the sun sets in the western mountains, the sky gradually darkens, and dark clouds cover the earth and everyone's heads. Food is piled up in one place, and if this little thing is distributed to everyone, then everyone will go hungry. If it is only distributed to a portion of people, who should it be distributed to? Not to whom? Children stare eagerly, it's time for them to grow their bodies. Pregnant women stare eagerly, carrying the future of the tribe in their stomachs, and they also need it. Young and strong-eyed, in order to have the strength to go hunting and gathering tomorrow, they also need it. No one spoke, despair quietly brewing in silence. The distribution of food has always been the responsibility of my mother, although it is difficult, she must make a choice. She was about to speak when she suddenly heard the wheezing sound coming from outside the hole. "Mom! Come and help." The orchid immediately jumped up and ran towards the outside of the cave, but soon turned back, jumping and shouting, "Come on! Fish! There are so many fish!" Everyone rushed out, and Zhang Tian and Xiao climbed up with a bamboo cage full of fish, snorting and releasing it in front of the crowd. Unable to hold on any longer, they lay on their backs and gasped for breath as they looked up at the sky. Zhang Tian felt dizzy. If he breathed with a knife, his throat and nose would ache. The owl's legs and feet would pull out his menstrual cramps. The whole person would curl up in a fried dough twists, and his face would be twisted with pain. Originally empty in the stomach and carrying heavy loads while climbing mountains, which is the body of primitive people, modern people would have hiccuped long ago. They collapsed exhausted, but the crowd erupted with excited cries. People rushed forward like crazy, picking up bamboo baskets weighing 60 or 70 pounds with a tiger's head. Judging from his appearance, there was still room for strength. The men crowded around the tiger's head, vying to touch the fish in the cage, as if holding up a trophy of strength. Even the substitute who sat on the cold bench for the whole game had no choice but to rub against it. The fish in the cage were frightened, and the dead fish's eyes stared more and more abstractly. The women came to help Zhang Tian and Xiao, and they immediately got up and walked back to the cave. Auntie finally breathed a sigh of relief. With this big basket of fish, along with winter bamboo shoots and prey, not only would it be enough to have a full meal tonight, but she could also save some for tomorrow morning's rations. There was no need to make difficult decisions. Xiao boasted to the tribe about fishing with the sky. Seeing that everyone didn't understand what fishing was, he followed Zhang Tian's words and said with great confidence, "Fishing is throwing a hook into the water, waiting for the fish to bite it." What is a hook? The hook is. Xiao remembered that he hadn't brought the fishing rod back, and his words were stuck for a moment. He didn't know how to describe it. Suddenly, Zhang Tian thought of carrying a few with him and shouted, "Oh my God, do you still have a fishing hook? Give me one." The tribe rarely eats fish and doesn't even know how to scale them. When they saw the tiger's head smashing the fish's skull with a stick and skewering it with bamboo sticks, they wanted to grill it on the campfire. Zhang Tian quickly stopped him. He scales the fish with a bone knife, then cuts it open to remove blood, organs, and bones. Blood is collected in water bags and distributed to everyone for consumption during dinner. It contains essential vitamins, minerals, and more importantly, salt. The internal organs hardly need to be pulled out, as they roll out when the stomach is opened. Mammalian organs need to be cleaned separately, especially the intestines. Primitive humans may not care about taste, but it does not mean they will accept the 9 transformations of the large intestine. Upon hearing the shout of the owl, Zhang Tian took out a fishing hook from the folds of his clothes and threw it to him. That's it. If a fish bites this, it won't run away. The owl began to show off with a lively expression. Auntie took the bone fishing hook from the owl's hand, unable to believe that even men couldn't pierce a fish with spears. Such a simple thing could catch it accurately. She looked carefully and found that the so-called fishing hook was finely polished, especially at the tip, which was sharper than a bone needle. Surprisingly, there was an inverted needle on the inside of the tip, and she couldn't figure out how it was polished. "What did you do?" she asked Xiao. Xiao shook his head and said, "God made it. Fishing is also what he taught me." Auntie looked up and found Zhang Tian among the men, only to find him teaching them how to deal with fish. She was even more surprised. A 9-year-old child who had never learned to grind bone needles or participated in hunting, how could he suddenly understand so much? End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Death and the Stars. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Death and the Stars. Low-end ingredients often do not require cooking, as long as they are cooked. Roast bamboo rats, roasted wild rabbits, roasted birds, grilled fish, grilled winter bamboo shoots. Everything can be grilled. Auntie tore off 2 rabbit hind legs and gave them to Zhang Tian and Xiao as a reward for their performance today. Zhang Tian was about to faint from hunger. He wolfed down the food and took a few bites, completely devouring it. As for the taste, in this era of relying on nourishment and blood to supplement salt, what else is there to taste? It's enough to eat protein and fat. But to be honest, tiger tongue has a very precise control over the heat. This rabbit leg is roasted tender but not raw, cooked but not old, just right, and you'll know it's an old master as soon as you eat it. Zhang Tian was given another fish, half a bird, and half a winter bamboo shoot. The fish was a bit old, obviously because he didn't often grill the fish. Tiger tongue tasted it himself, but was not very satisfied. He silently summarized his experience and lessons. Hiccup. After a long-lost meal, there are still some winter bamboo shoots and plant roots and stems left for tomorrow morning to cushion the stomach. Rat skin, rabbit skin, and even bird skin are meticulously and completely peeled off by tiger claws. Animal skin is a more precious resource than stone and bone tools, especially in the cold winter. The deer skin dress on Zhang Tian's body is mainly made of deer skin, and then sewn with mouse skin, rabbit skin, and other leftover materials. In addition to sewing clothes, animal skins can also be used to make bags. The water bags in the tribe are mostly made of animal skins, mostly taken from animals such as otters and beavers. They are of appropriate size and have good waterproof fur. They cut open their throats to remove organs, meat, and bones, and the remaining skin bags are natural water bags. The head is usually not cut off and is connected to the body by the skin on the back of the neck, serving as the lid of the water bag. Every time Zhang Tian caught a glimpse of the row of beast-headed bags leaning against the root of the cave wall, he felt frightened. Sitting in the cave for a long time, the smoke caused a headache in the skull. One of the reasons why the lifespan of these primitive people was so short was inhaling too much carbon monoxide produced by incomplete combustion. He went outside the cave to take a few breaths of fresh air and looked up at the sky. It was necessary to do routine tasks. Today, he suddenly stopped doing what he used to do every day, which may cause suspicion. The distant mountains under the darkness are like ink, and the stars outline the winding outlines. The cold mountains are silent, and even the insects are quietly chirping. Zhang Tian wants to lament how beautiful the moonlight is, but his words become, "How boring." On the second day after leaving the internet, think of it. Oh my goodness. Xiao asked Zhang Tianfa for help outside the venue. After eating and drinking, the men asked about fishing and wanted to join in, but they didn't know how to make the fishing rod, so the owl naturally didn't know. It's not really difficult, it's just cutting off the branches of bamboo and putting ropes on it. If you bring back the fishing rod, Zhang Tian doesn't even need to explain it. Everyone is a wise person and you can understand it at a glance. The grinding of fish hooks requires some skill, but more patience, especially when it comes to barbs. Without a file, it may take several days to grind. When everyone learned about the production method, they were all surprised that a bamboo could continuously catch fish from a source of energy. If they had known this, what would they have hunted? There are plenty of bamboo in the mountains, and everyone has one. Let's all go fishing. Auntie asked, "Oh my, how did you know about this?" This woke everyone up. Yeah, how does a child who hasn't even grown hair know about things that even grandma doesn't know? The puzzled gaze focused on Zhang Tian. Zhang Tian has been waiting for his mother to ask this question. His answer will determine the future of the tribe, whether to stay in this cave and wait for death, or to gamble on everyone's lives and fight against the Grim Reaper. He thought quietly for a moment, looked up at the kind parents across from the campfire, and said seriously, "Mom, before answering this question, can you tell the story about the stars again?" "Okay, then tonight I'll tell you the story of the stars again." Auntie recalled the past and her tone became distant. "A long, long time ago, when I was still young and had just learned to speak. There is a saying that I have to say to you every day now." "I know." Bai Chang, who had just learned to speak, "You must come back before dark." Auntie smiled and nodded, saying, "That's right, you must come back before dark, only the cave is safe." But at that time, I didn't understand. One night, I chased a firefly out of the cave and into the mountains and forests. Except for Bai and a few other children, everyone else had heard this story, but no matter how many times they heard it, every time it came to this point, everyone's hearts would ache. Bai even more anxiously hid in his mother's arms and tightly grasped her finger. I chased and chased, finally catching the firefly, but also lost my way home. The forest was particularly black and cold, and I was very scared. I sat on the ground and cried loudly. The firefly flew away from my fingers, but two faint green lights lit up in front of me. "It's the eyes of a wolf." Everyone held their breath together. Bai's face turned pale with fear, and she hugged her mother's leg. However, she soon became afraid and loudly said, "Auntie is still alive now, she must be fine then." "Yeah, I'm fine because my mother saved me and beat the wolf for me." But she was also injured, and the injury was getting worse day by day. She was also getting weaker day by day. On the day she left, I held her and cried, begging her not to die. She smiled and touched my head, telling me that she wouldn't die. She would become a star in the sky, watching and guarding me all the time. Everyone empathized fiercely, tears streaming in their eyes. No one jumped out of the cracks in the stones. The mother-son and mother-daughter relationship in this era is so close, it's really like a piece of flesh falling off one's body is another self. Women are particularly immersed, some are already mothers, some are about to become mothers, both sad and deeply moved. "You see." Auntie raised her hand and pointed to the sky outside the cave. "The star closest to the moon is my mother. Every person who leaves us will become a star, and all the stars in the sky have been transformed by our ancestors. As long as we look up, we can see them." The crowd looked up at the sky, at the twinkling stars that seemed to be blinking at them, and their emotions couldn't calm down for a long time. Auntie's mother was probably the first person in the world to associate death with the stars. Perhaps it was out of love and reluctance towards her daughter that she broadened the boundaries of her imagination at the last moment of her life and blurted out such romantic and touching words. "My story is finished. Oh my God, it's time to tell your story." Auntie brought the topic back to the right track, and everyone's attention returned to Zhang Tian. Zhang Tian brewed his emotions for a while, then shared his newly fabricated story in a mournful tone. "I haven't seen my mother before. On the day I was born, she became a star. So I often look up at the sky, I know she's always watching me, guarding me, and I also want to see her more and accompany her. Just yesterday, I heard a gentle voice. I thought it must be my mother. She taught me how to make fishing rods and hooks, saying that this method can be used for fishing. She also said that we should pray more to the sky, our ancestors will guide us, and the sky will guide us. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Guidance of the Sky. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Guidance of the Sky. Zhang Tian did not immediately use the name of his ancestors to cause them to migrate. Radical reforms will only lead to fierce resistance, and any attempt to change the thoughts of others should be gradual. Moreover, he is not yet ready to set off, so there is no need to worry. Faith value. 5. As soon as the words fell, the belief value immediately increased by 5 points. The setting of faith in the game is based on the heart, with the belief being spiritual and non-belief being non-existent. There is no formal requirement, and even if a person never prays, as long as they truly believe in the presence of a deity and believe that the sky will bring them guidance and enlightenment, they are believers. A 5-point increase in faith value indicates that 5 people have fully accepted Zhang Tian's words, believing that looking up at the sky will receive guidance from their ancestors. Considering that the tribe had not yet developed totem worship, reproductive worship, or other primitive beliefs, and had no concept of supernatural beings such as gods, he followed his mother's words and pushed his ancestors forward. Compared to the unreachable sky, ancestors were obviously more approachable and convincing. Everyone felt a little sorry for him. It turned out that he often looked up at the sky for this reason. Some members of his tribe originally did not understand his behavior, but now they all suddenly realized, from not understanding to sympathy and pity. Orchid walked over and hugged Zhang Tian, like a mother holding an injured child. Her actions were purely instinctive. At this time, people may not have been able to comfort their hearts with positive and warm words, but they have learned to practice the most primitive form of comfort through action. Auntie looked at the dancing flames and was stunned. She occasionally hears the voice of her mother or ancestors, but usually in a dream. Sometimes when she wakes up, tears flow down her face, but she can't remember what her mother said. Can you hear your mother's voice even when looking up at the sky? Yes, my mother clearly said that she would become a star in the sky, but I only stared at my feet and the people around me, but forgot to look up at the sky and see my mother. Auntie didn't doubt Zhang Tian's words, but suddenly felt a little sad. She couldn't help but think, if only she had looked up at the sky often when she was a child. Xiao was also a bit sad, but he was even more curious. His curiosity had always been strong, and he couldn't help but ask, what is prayer? Prayer is looking up at the sky and telling it one's wishes. Zhang Tian directly defines the object of prayer as the sky. Oh. Xiao made a sudden realization, then your wish must have been to hear your mother's voice. Can you fulfill your wish just by praying? This is certainly not possible, but seeking benefits and avoiding harm, animal instincts, and fish still need to be baited before they become hooked. People are much smarter than fish, and there are no benefits for believers. The benefits can be abstract judgment of the end of the day, reincarnation, or actual divine authority, spending money to atone for sins, all based on human needs. The wishes of primitive people are nothing more than having enough to eat and wear warm clothes, and having children grow up safely. Zhang Tianxin said that there is no need to trouble the gods for these requirements, and I can work hard to fulfill them for you. So he incited everyone and said, I don't know about that anymore. You can give it a try, everyone can give it a try. Xiao, Bai, and a group of children immediately jumped up and ran outside the cave, looking up at the sky. Everyone followed out, looking eager to try, including the elderly grandmother who didn't often leave the cave. Just make a wish to the sky, it won't lose anything, why not do it? The best has been achieved, but if not, it becomes a collective activity, not a loss. With this mindset, everyone prayed to the sky. Men hope to hunt more wild animals tomorrow, women hope to collect more plants tomorrow, children hope to not go hungry tomorrow, and it was because of the high level of grandma who hoped that the cold weather would pass soon and the tribe would continue forever. After everyone finished praying, Zhang Tianxing claimed to have heard another voice and received new guidance. We need more fishing rods and hooks, and more bamboo cages to hold fish. This is exactly what men hope for. These strong and sturdy savages think that fishing and hunting are the same thing, and they think that even 2 children can catch a full cage of fish. If it were them, there would definitely be only a lot more. They excitedly ran into the hole and enthusiastically selected bamboo for making fishing rods. However, the quantity of bamboo in stock is limited, and not everyone can share it. The tiger head and tiger paw hit the same bamboo, and both claimed to have picked it out themselves first. They each grabbed one end of the bamboo and shouted at each other. You can't tell the winner by your voice. Auntie asked them to compete in wrestling according to the tribe's tradition, and whoever wins will belong to them. Not only the tiger's head and claws, but also the men in dispute lifted their dresses and grabbed each other's arms for a collision of strength and skill. The woman's cheers stimulated all the wildness flowing in their blood, making them even more fighting-spirited. Unlike the dullness of last night, everyone had a full stomach today and learned that there was a way to catch fish in the river, which made their mood particularly relaxed. The night is darker, the flames are fiercer, and men are entangled and fighting together, venting their excess energy in the most primitive and barbaric way. The vigorous hormone breath fills the entire cave. Zhang Tian spent 2 points of faith points to exchange for the remaining 2 files, namely round files and half-round file heads, which are exactly the same set as the previous flat files. The file option is no longer available in the redeemable resources. He used ready-made fish hooks and bamboo cages as a reference and taught women to grind fish hooks and weave bamboo cages. What is this? Orchid noticed that Zhang Tian was holding a thin black stick in his hand. File, sharpen things faster with this. Zhang Tian took a piece of broken bone and placed it on the slate, grinding it with a file. The tip of the broken bone quickly became slender and sharp. Everyone opened their eyes and was amazed, it was much faster than a stone knife. How was this done? When I looked up at the sky, suddenly it fell from the sky. I thought, this must be a gift from the sky. Zhang Tian gave 3 files to orchids, safflower, and bamboo leaves respectively, teaching them how to use modern tools. Faith value 9. In an instant, 6 people sincerely believed that the sky had great power. Indeed, something tangible is more convincing. The men who competed against each other gradually determined the winner. The victorious man pounded his chest and howled, showing off his strength. Then, he bravely picked up his own winning item and went outside the cave to make a fishing rod. The man who was defeated in the battle was disheartened and returned to the cave, gritting his back teeth to polish the stone axe, secretly holding back his strength. He thought to himself that it was better not to take this broken bamboo, and when tomorrow morning comes, he will go to the mountains to choose a better one. Zhang Tian didn't make them wait for so long, so he entrusted them with a very important task in the name of the sky. Go outside to collect bark, the more the better. As soon as they heard it was very important, the losers immediately became full of energy and picked up their stone axes to vigorously cut down the trees near the cave, carefully peeling off the bark. After dark, there was no need to work, but now it was a busy scene. No one, regardless of gender or age, had any intention of resting. Auntie looked at the busy tribe and breathed a sigh of relief while feeling comforted. Although she has been acting very calm these days, constantly comforting her tribe with her stories and experiences, she is actually more anxious than anyone else in her heart. The weather was unusually cold, and she faintly sensed it. Even the coldest day she had ever experienced, it was not like how it is now. After the hottest moment, it suddenly cooled down. The period of harvesting and storing food was skipped over. This is a situation she has never seen before. Fortunately, the matter seems to have been resolved. She turned her head to look at the brilliant night sky. Perhaps as heaven said, all of this is the guidance of our ancestors. She looked at the star closest to the moon, as if it had become brighter. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Higher Productivity. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Higher Productivity. Zhang Tian was rummaging through the pile of stones. From the day people transition from fighting alone in the wilderness to living in groups, they learn to hoard. Initially, like hamsters and squirrels, they mainly hoarded food to cope with the cold winter, but gradually evolved into picking up and storing anything good. The most commonly stocked item in the tribe is bamboo, followed by stones. Food, which is prone to spoilage, is actually the least stocked. When women go out to collect, they will bring back raw stones that are suitable for polishing into tools of all sizes and hardness, including square, round, flat, and various shapes. What are you doing? Xiao followed over, and his intuition told him that his brother was going to do something different again. Zhang Tian picked up a flat round stone about the size of a palm, with a thickness of about 2 centimeters, and ordered, "Give me a stone knife." Xiao quickly brought back a stone knife and squatted beside him with a curious expression on his face. Zhang Tian used the stone knife as a chisel and forcefully struck the center of the flat circular stone block, quickly chiseling out a thumb-sized depression. He blew away the stone chips, picked up a small amount of sand and gravel from the ground, sprinkled it into the depression, and then quickly rotated the stone knife repeatedly. The depression sank at a speed visible to the naked eye, and soon a small hole was drilled. Owl let out an exclamation of surprise. He can also drill holes for stones, but he can't do it so quickly. Is it because of the addition of sand and gravel? After comparison, he found that Tian had only done one more step than him, which greatly improved efficiency. Therefore, he planned to try adding some sand and gravel to the next drilling. Zhang Tian lifted the stone and looked at the owl through the small hole in the center of the stone. Because it is a single dot-sided drilling, the hole presents an appearance of one end being larger and the other end being smaller, which is far less uniform than pipe drilling, and it comes with its own thread. However, drilling holes is time-consuming and labor-intensive. He just wants to make a simple spinning wheel, there's no need for such trouble. Xiao also raised a drilled stone and sniped at Zhang Tian's homeman. The two of them stared through the hole and smiled at each other. Xiao asked, "There are many stones with holes here, why do we need to make another one?" "Because there is no such shape inside. Spinning wheel, first of all, it must be a wheel to rotate, use its own weight and rotation to make a pile of tangled fibers drawn thin, and polymerize into fried dough twist shape." Zhang Tian found a wooden stick of appropriate thickness and inserted it into the hole to serve as a spinning rod. "What is this?" "Spinning wheel. Spinning wheel." Xiao repeated it several times, silently taking note, but he still didn't know what the purpose of this thing called spinning wheel was. The men have peeled back a large amount of bark, and together with the woman, they tear the fibers in the inner layer of the bark into thin strips, and then knead these fine bark fibers into strong threads. 7 new fishing rods have been made, but the light rod commander cannot catch fish, at least 7 matching fishing lines are needed. Everyone sat around the campfire, rubbing threads with their hands. These rough bark fibers were very strict with their hands. The children quickly rubbed their palms red and blistered, while the hard-working women who often twisted threads were already covered in calluses. At this moment, Zhang Tian walked over with the simple spinning wheel he had just made, and stopped everyone who was kneading thread with their hands. He tied one end of the bark fiber to a spinning rod and held the other end in his hand, then twisted the spinning rod. The spinning wheel quickly rotated, and the bark fiber was constantly stretched and twisted, forming a slender and tough thread. Everyone was dumbfounded. They had discovered early on that plant fibers could be kneaded into threads, but never thought that this process would be so easy and freehand. A stone and a wooden stick can actually replace both hands, even faster and better than rubbing them with your hands when they found that the thread spun with spinning wheels was thinner and more knotted than the one they had worked hard to create. the thread in their hands suddenly lost its fragrance and they all looked at Zhang Tian together. Zhang Tian saw 7 words in their eager eyes. "Coach, I want to learn this." The use of spinning wheels is not complicated, and he quickly taught everyone. However, having only one spinning wheel is obviously not enough. He asked Xiao, "Have you learned how to do it?" Xiao immediately understood and happily said to the men, "I'll teach you how to make spinning wheels." One stone spinning wheel after another was manufactured, and people were accustomed to hand-twisting hemp thread for thousands of years, which was replaced overnight by spinning wheels with higher productivity. Although the process of civilization has diversity and unity, and although social progress requires historical contingency and human subjective initiative, ultimately, it cannot escape the grasp of productive forces. The rough bark fibers quickly turned into slender and tough threads, tightly tying one end of the thread to the bamboo pole and then tying a fishing hook to the other end. 7 fishing rods were formed in an instant. Auntie smiled as she watched the men playing with fishing rods and the women weaving hemp thread, asking the children to bring burnt charcoal and record the changes and important events of the tribe on the cave wall. In previous murals, one could see inventions and creations such as stone spears, bone needles, and bamboo baskets that changed the way the tribe lived. However, now, after the traces left by our ancestors, Auntie has added a fishing rod composed of 2 thin lines and a spinning wheel composed of a flat circle and a vertical line. Zhang Tian looked at the simple brushstrokes on the cave wall and grinned. Late at night, everyone fell asleep in exhaustion and satisfaction. When I woke up the next day, the sunlight had already shone into the cave and landed on Zhang Tian's shoulder, but I couldn't feel any warmth. This day is getting colder and colder. The 7 men with fishing rods, led by Hu Tu, also learned from Zhang Tian's appearance yesterday by erecting bamboo poles, lifting bamboo cages, and preparing to set off. After last night, everyone no longer regarded Zhang Tian as an ordinary child, but as a prodigy guided by the sky and ancestors. It's a bit excessive to say it's a boy. Zhang Tian is at least 9 years old. Children in the tribe reach adulthood at the age of 10 and can participate in hunting when they reach adulthood. At the age of 12, they can represent the tribe and reproduce offspring with the opposite sex from other tribes. Zhang Tian was born during the melting of ice and snow, which means that when the weather warms up, he will become an adult. I can still be considered half a man now. A group of 9 people descended to the river and arrived at the backwater where they had been fishing yesterday. Xiao ran all the way to pick up the fishing rod left here last night, while Zhang Tian stepped straight into the cold river and picked up the fishing cage that had sunk at the bottom of the river. 2 bamboo cages, one containing 1 fish and 3 shrimp, and the other containing 2 fish and 2 shrimp, both small ones. The men were amazed and thought to themselves that they had already gained something before they even started fishing. I feel more confident. The owl was puzzled and asked Zhang Tian, "Why don't they swim out? If you could understand, you would be as stupid as these fish." Simply put, it means that intelligence is not sufficient, and one can learn from the big mouth but cannot speak from the small mouth. Zhang Tian is not very satisfied with the fish caught in the fishing cage. With such 2 large cages, he only caught 3 fish in one night. As expected, this type of cage is more suitable for placing in clear shallow streams. Catching the river shrimp was an unexpected harvest. These 2 bamboo cages were woven quite casually, and some of the gaps between the bamboo pieces could even pass through 3 fingers. With hard work, the river shrimp was able to escape. It can only be said that after the weather became cold, everyone lay flat. Instead of struggling, it was better to destroy it quickly. He concentrated the fish and shrimp in a bamboo cage and then immersed them in water. Xiao led 7 beginners to dig fish bait. The muddy land on the shore was soft and moist, nourished by many weeds and algae, making it quite fertile. It was easy to dig out earthworms and other carnivorous insects. The owl skillfully hung the bait and swung the rod to lower the hook. Newcomers learn by hanging the bait on the hook and then swinging the rod. Oh my! Who pulled me? You let go. During this period, Jean Tian used a spinning wheel to transform a wire drill, replacing hand rubbing. In the blink of an eye, he completed drilling wood to start a fire. Looking up, he saw that the fishing lines of 7 beginners were all tangled together, and he suddenly felt a flock of crows flying by in his mind. Patiently help them separate the lines and then separate their people as well. The riverbank line of this backwater bay is very long, with fishing spots arranged every 10 meters, each fishing their own, and each other's time is peaceful. Now, it is finally clear. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. You Undercover. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. You Undercover. 8 wild men wearing animal skin skirts and unkempt heads stood quietly by the river like 8 statues. Zhang Tian sat leisurely by the fire, roasting the fire. He felt like a wicked slave owner. If he were to change into a small suit with a full body, and put an exquisite crocodile skin whip next to the fire, it would be even more so. But in fact, he just sat down a short time ago. Xiao doesn't need him to worry, he's worried about the other 7 people. Tiger Head is used to chasing and fighting in the mountains and forests, and now keeping him in a fixed position for a long time is even more uncomfortable than killing him. If he had known fishing was so boring, he would rather go hunting in the mountains. But when everyone came, he suddenly gave up and couldn't justify it. He saw the owl fishing for fish one after another, and his unyielding spirit was stimulated. In hunting, he was always the leader. How could he be compared to a child? He restrained his restless heart and stared intently at the broad-leaved buoy on the river surface. But his buoy seemed to be nailed to the river surface, motionless. Seeing that all the other beginners had caught the fish under Zhang Tian's guidance, leaving him with nothing, he was extremely anxious and cursed in his heart, "You're biting something that has no eggs. How's it going, Tiger Head?" Zhang Tian approached slowly and kicked the bamboo cage next to the tiger's head and said, "It's still empty." Tiger Head suddenly felt a great deal of pressure and hurriedly said, "Immediately. There will be big fish catching the bait soon." After observing for a while, Zhang Tian patted the shoulder of the tiger's head and said solemnly, "Big brother, you're hanging the bottom." Hanging at the bottom. Tiger Head was confused. "Give me the fishing rod." Zhang Tian took the fishing rod and shook it, realizing that the hanging object was not heavy, so he went straight to catch it. A bunch of weeds, wrapped in a few pieces of gravel in the middle. "Wait." Zhang Tian handed the fishing rod back to the tiger's head, crouched down and cleared the weeds, digging out the gravel wrapped in it. This is Zhang Tian's pupils froze and his face slightly changed color. He was extremely surprised and said, "How could pottery appear? This is unreasonable. Those few pieces of gravel are not stones, but fragments of clay made by burning clay. There are no other tribes nearby, and according to my mother, the nearest tribe is at least 100 miles away. These fragments of pottery should have been washed here by the river, which means that a tribe located upstream of the river has already mastered the technique of pottery making." The shock that Zhang Tian was shocked by was exactly the same as the people who first came into contact with spinning wheels last night. From these fragments, it can be seen that the pottery making technique used by the other party is not complicated. It should be the most primitive and simple bonfire firing method, and the ultimate one is pit firing. As long as he is willing, he can replicate it tonight. The fragments themselves have nothing special, it's just that they shouldn't have appeared in this era, which contradicts the background setting of the game. Water, food, fire, and shelter are the basic elements necessary for the survival of primitive tribes. Pottery is essentially something that improves the quality of life, and its presence or absence does not affect survival. Those who have eaten before but have not finished, those whose basic survival needs have not been guaranteed, cannot have the extra energy and thoughts to think about how to make life better. Being able to develop pottery-making technology indicates that the other party has sufficient productivity and at least a stable source of food. Such a tribe is likely to have entered an agricultural society. Thinking of this, Zhang Tian's expression couldn't help but become strange. This river flows north-south, from north to south, and is located upstream of the river, further north. Now that the Ice Age is approaching, the more northern it is, the more difficult it is. If tribes located upstream of the river really develop agriculture, they will inevitably cling to that 1 acre of land and it will eventually be over. Thinking about it this way, hunting and gathering are actually good things. When running away, there is no need to consider sinking costs, and there will be no excessive psychological burden. It's just a matter of switching from one hole to another. Zhang Tian casually threw the clay fragments back into the river and patted off the dust on his hand. After his initial surprise, he quickly accepted this fact. Uneven development in different regions during the same era is a normal phenomenon, not to mention now. This is true in any era, and even in modern times, the gap between different countries and people is greater. Compared to the gap between Rome and cattle and horses, the difference between pottery and stone tools is nothing. Zhang Tian has no plans to burn pottery for the time being. Burning pottery can significantly improve the quality of life, which is both beneficial and detrimental. The reason is similar to his lack of confidence in the tribe upstream of the river. Once living conditions improve, it becomes difficult to persuade people to migrate. Moreover, it is not convenient to bring bottles and jars along the way. Everything he is doing now should be prepared for his future migration, which will be a long and arduous journey that requires a sense of perseverance. As for improving his life, it is not too late to wait until he settles down in the warm south. Got it. Got it. Tigerhead suddenly shouted excitedly. Zhang Tian turned his head and saw the broad-leaved buoy floating up and down, the fishing line taut, the fishing rod curved like a weeping willow, and 1/2 meter high water splashing in the river. With such strong tail fins, it seemed like a big guy. Give me the fishing rod. Zhang Tian stepped forward quickly, but it was already too late. Tigerhead was impatient and had already forgotten the skills taught by Zhang Tian. As soon as he saw the fish fighting fiercely, his blood and energy surged up. He thought to himself that he was not afraid of anyone, so he immediately grabbed the fishing rod, and the muscles on his arm bulged high and pulled hard. Click. Ah yo. With a crisp sound, the bamboo pole snapped and the tiger's head couldn't hold back its strength. It took more than 10 steps back and finally fell to the ground, exhaling in pain. You rascal. Zhang Tianyin cursed and waded into the river to pick up the broken half of the fishing rod, recycling the thread and hook tied to it. The fish had already run away, with a large piece of fish lips remaining on the hook, indicating how much brute force the tiger's head had used. Tigerhead cursed and climbed up, throwing the broken pole in his hand onto the ground. Feeling embarrassed, he sighed, I'll go get another bamboo. Don't move. Zhang Tian stopped drinking loudly. Hu too was about to turn around when he was scared by the sudden sharp drink, which almost made his feet and stomach cramp. At least he stopped moving, but found that everyone was staring behind him with a frightened expression. He immediately tightened his nerves and perked up his ears. He immediately noticed that not far behind him, there was some terrifying creature watching, and just being stared at, he had already felt difficulty breathing and cold sweat rising from his back. Tigerhead's muscles were tense all over, like a sharp arrow ready to shoot. He wanted to look back, but his body had been taken over by instinct and he couldn't move. The last time I had this experience was being watched by a pack of wolves. He heard a rustling sound, the sound of leaves and grass rubbing against his body. He felt the ground shaking slightly, and that thing was getting closer. A shadow stretched by the sunlight covered his shadow. A quadruped predator, much larger in size than a wolf. The shadow suddenly stood up, as if a dark cloud had enveloped its head. The sky suddenly dimmed, and the heavy breathing of hot air was within reach. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Bears appearing, please pay attention. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors.